Welcome to this bite-sized episode of the Payroll Podcast with me, your host, Nick Day. These are short snippets from my main podcast show, which is the go-to source for all things related to payroll. Featuring experts from the world of payroll, these bite-sized episodes are going to share key insights, nuggets of information, tips, and best practices to help you navigate the complex world of payroll. And remember, if you ever need support recruiting talent for your payroll team, please do get in touch with either myself or my team at jgarecruitment.com. For now, sit back, tune in, and let's talk payroll. We're in a new world of work, hybrid working, people working from home, people now taking a call, for example, after hours from a boss, or the fact they need to be there for that call that comes in at 8 o'clock, or they need to handle something. How do you navigate those kind of new considerations? I know they were there before, but obviously more en masse now with those kind of considerations.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what one of the challenges we're dealing with just now, and one of the kind of big risks we're dealing with just now, if you're maybe talking about somebody who is kind of an office worker, they're working from home a couple of days a week, they're taking calls, they're checking emails into the night and everything like that. First thing to kind of break up here is that there's different types of worker for minimum wage purposes, which makes something that's already complicated even more complicated. So I know I'm probably not helping much. But the main two that we deal with are those called time workers. And that's somebody who's got an hourly rate of pay. They're paid that hourly rate of pay for each hour that they work in a pay period. And then salaried workers. So they're given an annual salary. They've got on their contract ascertainable annualized hours. So that would be breaking down the weekly hours, monthly hours, etc. And they're paid a salary, a basic annual salary on the back of that. The rules are slightly different from those two types of workers. So one of the big risks that we're dealing with at the moment, and just to touch on that because you've kind of prompted it there, is on excess hours for those that are working as salaried workers. So you're getting a lot of contracts for people on salaries. Now, I've got it in my contract as well. And you're contracted to work 35 hours a week, but you may be required to work additional hours unpaid as and when the business needs you, which is absolutely fine. That unpaid working time, if you're a salaried worker, so you're on a salary, you try to think of it more as this is an annual thing rather than a month by month thing. So you've got your annual basic hours and you've got your annual pay. So let's just say, for complete argument's sake, I have annual hours of 1,000 hours a year. So my annual basic hours are 1,000 hours a year. That's great if my salary's tied up to that and I work 1,000 hours over the course of the year. But if I hit that 1,000 hours, because I'm doing additional hours through the weeks, through the months, if I hit that 1,000 hours before the end of my contractual year, I'm then working excess hours. I'm working additional unpaid excess hours. And HMRC don't calculate that the way you would expect them to. Say if I was lucky enough to be paid $4,000 a month or whatever it is, say $4,000 a month, and you think, well, I've worked 20 additional hours in one particular month. Well, that's great. I've got $4,000 here, so I'm never going to come under the minimum wage because I've got so much leeway within that month. Yeah. But in actuality, HMRC look at it annually. So it then becomes a conversation of when I hit my annual hours. So let's say, for argument's sake, I hit my 1,000 hours, but I hit it at the end of month 11, right at the end of my 11th month. So month 12 is sitting there. I've worked all of my annual hours that I've agreed to work in my contract, all my basic annual hours. So any hours that I actually work within month 12 are what we're calling excess hours. And they're essentially kind of unpaid excess hours at that point. So then, as an employer, the way the HMRC calculate this, to kind of make it as simplistic as possible, what you need to then ensure is that in month 12, the person's paid at least the minimum wage, not only for their contracted hours, so not only for what I'm contracted to work in that month, but for any hours that I actually do work, because those are all excess hours. So you can very easily, and we've got loads of kind of examples and calculations if anybody wants to follow up with us, where people on 35k and 40k a year, just due to the fact that they're working excess hours through the year, can be underpaid the minimum wage. And when I'm talking about HMRC kind of expanding their enforcement and looking at larger businesses, they're also looking at sectors that you wouldn't expect them to look at for exactly this risk. They're looking at office workers, people who don't usually come into that quote unquote low paid, high risk national minimum wage area. And that's where we're seeing spotlights just now. That's where we're seeing clients being questioned and having, records taken away around that specific risk. It's a hard risk to explain. It's a complex one because the calculation isn't the way you would logically do it, but it's the way HMRC do it. And that's where we are seeing a lot of dropped jaws from employers and clients at the moment.
I hope you enjoyed today's bite-sized edition of the Payroll Podcast. Remember to subscribe to the show, share it with your payroll colleagues and friends, and why not also check out some of our previous episodes for more golden nuggets of payroll information that you never know, they may just help you along in your own payroll journey. But for now, I'm Nick Day, and you've been listening to the Payroll Podcast Bite-Sized.